It was originally called George Best All By Himself, and I think it's screened at a number of film festivals with that title, but it's being released now in cinemas under the title Best. It's a documentary by Daniel Gordon, who directed about 13 years ago a film called A State of Mind, which is about young gymnasts in North Korea, which was really sort of fascinating, in-depth access as they prepared for the mass games over there. And he also did a TV documentary called Hillsborough that was on last year, which was really, really good. This title change sort of should make a big difference, because if you're calling the film George Best All By Himself, it's about the isolation that he can feel as being, at the time, the greatest footballer in the UK. And this idea that his excellence lifted him onto a level where nobody could really relate to him. But the idea of just calling it Best, it's about his, that particular status. This guy is literally going around with the word best. He's doing his job with the word best written between his shoulders, and so the kind of onus of responsibility of that. The film sort of suits both titles and neither, and you can imagine it being released under any number of other titles because it doesn't ever really come down on what it wants to say about him. It outlines the story that we already know about him. Came over from Northern Ireland, spotted by Manchester United, age 15, played a key role in winning the European Cup for Manchester United, age 22. And that, at the age of 22, was somehow his career peak. And from then there was this long, protracted slide, decline into despair and alcoholism. And then, of course, later on we see him being treated as a celebrity, even out in Los Angeles where nobody cares about football at all. In fact, here's a clip of how he was received by various people, including his wife-to-be, Angie.
He was a lovely fella, and women just flocked around him like bees on honey. It was quite an unbelievable experience to see it. You see it with pop stars and you kind of expected it, but he was a pop star in his own right. And along came this girl that was a little bit different.
I'm working for Cher, living with her in Beverly Hills. We get a phone call to the house from a man called Henry Weinberg, I think it was, Elizabeth Taylor's boyfriend at the time, and says George would like you to come to his party in Hermosa Beach. So he picks me up, drives me down to Hermosa Beach. There's no party. There's George in his flip-flops and his shorts and his T-shirt, and there's me all dressed up. And he's sitting at the bar all by himself. So I thought, sweet.
Now, look, not every film that has one name for its title, every documentary, has to be like Asif Kapadia's Amy. But comparing it to Amy is a very good way to sum up what Best doesn't manage to achieve. Amy is a story of someone like George Best, who became famous at a very specific point in what it meant to be famous. He's talked about as being this Beatles-like character, who becomes a celebrity rather than just a sportsman. The film doesn't really get under the skin of that. Amy was also a story of a city. It was about how London thought of itself creatively and how it presented its, a particular creative face to the world. And it doesn't get under the skin of that either. As for George Best's talent, again, the treatment is really superficial. It's kind of regurgitating press stories of the time, footage of the time, but without really kind of getting a handle on what it meant to be that talented in that field. He talks at the end, there's a clip of Best talking about how he wants to be remembered purely for his football. And then Hugh McIlvanney, who's one of the contributors, the sports journalist Hugh McIlvanney, he talks about how that's naive and he was always going to be remembered for his personal problems as well. What the film doesn't then go on to say is why it wants to remember him, why it wants to retell this story that's been told again and again. For it to have worked, it would have had to have done that.